Hello and welcome to Film and Game Composers. I am Mina Shamali, and today we are speaking to Mr. Gabriel Mann. He's a TV, film, and video game composer who effortlessly jumps back between scoring dark drama and comedy. He's the man behind the music on Modern Family and several other sitcoms. He's co-written songs for Arrested Development, and he's worked on several thrillers and dramatic projects, the most recent of which is Rectify, which is about to go into its fourth and final season. So we had a chance to speak with Gabriel before in a written interview, but today he's here in person to chat. Hello, Gabriel.
Hello.
It's wonderful to actually talk to you this time.
Yes, I love it. Can't wait.
It's also a really interesting thing where you send people questions and they respond back, and you've spoken to them, but you haven't really spoken to them.
I know. Now I'm afraid because it's all spur of the moment. I have to think on my feet here.
Well, you know, I could have sent you the questions ahead of time, and you'd be like ready and scripted.
That would have been too much for me.
Yeah, because you're really busy, aren't you? Like
I am busy. Yes.
So you're about to start working on Rectify at some point. What else are you doing these days?
Well, right now, the stuff that's actually happening at this moment is School of Rock, which is for Nickelodeon. So it's School of Rock is sort of like a quadruple job. We make an album, and I write songs, and I produce existing songs, and I score it. So
oh wow.
I'm involved on the front end. I'm involved in pre-production, which I normally am not on a normal scoring gig.
Yeah.
And then I'm also involved with production. I have like a bunch of people that are helping out with the music on the show, because there's kids playing and there's kids singing, and I need like music coaches, and we have teachers, and there's like people making sure that it looks right on camera, and then there's the writing of the music and the production of the songs, and like, on the weekends I've got like 20 people in the studio, because there's like the kids and the parents of the kids and the teachers and the Nickelodeon people. It's out of control. So that's one thing that's happening. And I'm also doing an animated show called Dawn of the Croods that I do with Rebecca Newell.
Is that like a prequel to the Croods movie?
It is a prequel to the Croods movie. That's exactly what it is. And it's straight to Netflix. It's like, how many episodes? There's like 13 episodes that are up now, and we're in the middle of the second batch of 13, and then there's going to be, ultimately there's 50 something episodes. It's like a major,
wow.
It's like a 2.5-year job. And then I'm also doing a sort of anime, not exactly anime, but sort of anime show called Battle Claw for a company in China. And it's really cool. It's crazy. And like lots of...
when you say anime, are we expecting the crazy anime tropes and the unexpected things that will just... like it's like a big animated acid trip.
This particular thing involves this battle claw. You wear this thing on your sort of forearm, and you like press buttons, and you create these beasts, and the beasts fight each other, and it's like every episode is like a battle between one team, the team of our heroes, and some other bad team. And then there's some overarching, like there's the ultimate bad guy who's like the Emperor from Star Wars, and there's like the ultimate good guys who is like our sort of Luke Skywalker guy. And it's pretty fun though. That's another animated thing that I'm working on. I'm trying to think of.
That's sort of like crossing over ideas from Iron Man with ideas from Pacific Rim with ideas from Star Wars.
Yeah, there's a lot, but it's also like very sort of rooted in the classic like Pokemon vibe. You know what I mean? It's for kids. And it's not, I've seen those shows because my son is really into that stuff. So it's going to be fun for me to do it. And then he's going to watch it, and then he's going to get the battle claw, and it's going to be like awesome. Anyway, and then I'm starting to do some songs. We're talking about doing more songs for Rosewood. Rosewood is like a procedural drama on Fox.
Yeah.
And we did a few songs for one episode, and it went over really well. So we're talking about doing a bunch of songs for the next season. So that's something that's starting to get talked about over the summer. But the stuff I'm really busy on right now is School of Rock and these 2 animated shows.
Wow.
And that's what's happening right now. And then I'm trying to get all that finished before starting Rectify, which won't happen hopefully till later in August.
Wow, man, that you lead a damn busy life, man. That's crazy. Tell me, well,
that's not even the busy part. This is summer. It's slow. This is the slow time. I'm trying to like find stuff for Neve to do here. He's like bored out of his mind.
Neve's your assistant.
Yeah, he's
your
over here.
co-composer.
Like, he's like,
hello, Neve.
Look at him. He's just like surfing on the internet. He doesn't care.
Just open Facebook and it's just like
yeah.
And so last time you said I was asking you about balancing life and work and that kind of thing. You tell me, you try to make time for that because you got how many kids you got?
I've got 2 kids. I got a girl and a boy. There'll be 11 and 8.
Wow.
And so that's hard. It's fine. It's just I just try to go home for dinner and be there for bedtime. And I mean, I really try to not be crazy. I'm busy, but I don't find that it helps that much to stay here super long hours. I would rather go home, have a normal life, and then come back in the morning after I drop the kids at school. And like, I'm pretty efficient also. Like during the day, I'm like cranking it out all day long. And so it's not, it's like a job. I really treat it like it's a normal job. And when things get hectic, I have help. And, I try to not fall into the usual composer complaining about working all the time.
No, and it is a decision, isn't it? It is a choice you have to actively make.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. It seems like, there are people who would prefer that. They would prefer to say that they're working all the time. And I don't know why they do that. I don't know. I would prefer to not be working all the time. I mean, I want enough work and I want to then have a life. So
it's interesting though, because I had a lecturer when I was studying music. I had this lecturer in composition who would talk about people who had their blood was music kind of thing, in the sense that they just did it all the time, probably to the detriment of other parts of their lives. I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, the reality is that I do it all the time anyway, even when I'm not I mean, I'm here from 8:30 to 6 p.m. Like that's plenty of music for any person for one day.
Right.
And most of that time is spent, I mean, probably at least half of that time, depending on what's going on, at least half of it is actually writing new music. And there are sometimes when it's more than that. There are sometimes when it's when I'm just writing all day long, every second of the day. And then I'm sort of sending things out to get finished and mixed and guitared and drummed and whatever else. And, that's plenty. Like I can't even imagine doing more than that. There are times when it's more than that. There are times like during pilot season or when things are on top of each other that I don't really have any control over. There are times when I have to stay here late, or I have to stay here like really late. And there are times when I have to work on the weekend and all that kind of stuff that everybody has to do sometimes. But I try to be organized about it because I have a lot of work and it has to all get done. And if I'm not organized about it, then things sort of get lost in the shuffle.
And that's a big key to it, isn't it? Is finding a way to be organized and I suppose compartmentalize your life and try to compartmentalize to an extent, I suppose. But it really is. I don't think creatives are organized enough because they're like, oh well, we need the inspiration to strike, yada yada yada.
Well, I don't know if that's so true in terms of like when you're talking about like a sort of modern day composer for media.
Of course,
they're generally you have to be organized. Otherwise you just don't get hired anymore. Like if you lose your music, or if you like aren't ready, if you don't have the music ready when it was supposed to be ready, you're just not going to get hired anymore.
You live and die by deadlines.
Yeah, so you have to be organized about it. Otherwise, you just have to. It's part of the job is being organized. You have to like You know, and if you're not, then you hire someone who keeps you on top of it. You know, and they're like, you're supposed to be doing this.
Maybe that's probably the biggest piece of advice any creative needs. It's like, if you're not organized, hire someone to get you in line.
Somebody's got to be organized in the team, otherwise it's going to be a problem.
And so, do your kids watch the shows that you
they watch School of Rock? They're big fans of School of Rock. They love it.
And are you like the coolest dad ever?
Well, I don't know. You know, I don't know. They definitely are into it, and they I don't know. I don't know what they consider me in terms of my coolness factor. They probably don't really think that. They like the show, but I don't think they really connect that they know that I work on it.
Yeah.
But it's almost like they don't really know exactly. It's not like, you know, they're plenty old enough to understand. It's just like, I don't know. I don't think it impresses them. Let's put it that way.
Oh, wow. It's funny. It's because I often think about it, it's like, what is it like to be, you know, the child of this famous composer, like the child of John Williams or Jerry Goldsmith or like Hans Zimmer.
John Williams' son is a singer, and I don't know about Jerry Goldsmith's son, but he's like a big singer, John Williams' son. I'm pretty sure he's in Toto right now. Anyway, they're but that's a good question. I think about that sometimes, like what to have to live up to the fame of your father or mother, if they really are. I mean, like, I'm not famous. I have like a normal job, like a normal person. But like, if they were really, I think about that sometimes. That's a bummer. That's got to be very difficult. You have to really be comfortable in your own skin.
Well, it's funny because I spoke to Joey Newman recently, who comes from the whole Newman composing family.
Yeah.
And if that's not one of the most daunting things ever as a composer, it's just like,
you know, it's funny.
He takes it. Yeah, sorry.
He's a friend of mine. I love Joey, and he's totally. It just doesn't affect him at all. He just does his thing. And he works on his stuff, and it's just, they're like his family. It's not
exactly.
It's not a big deal,
and,
you know.
But that's the thing. It's like he doesn't have this attitude. Oh no, I got to live up to the Newmans. I got he's just like,
no, he doesn't. He's just perfectly fine with himself.
I think I asked him that. He's like, what did he say? He said, oh, look, first people were maybe interested or curious as he's a Newman. But then I really had to prove what I got to do. The name couldn't really carry me that far.
That's true. That's exactly right. If the proof is in the pudding. If it's not there, then they're gonna, you know, he's not gonna get hired just because he's a Newman.
And it's funny because I find that composers specifically are a very different kind of famous. Like, a lot of people have probably heard your music, but you can walk down the street and know who you are unless you tell them, "Hey, I wrote the music for Modern Family. I wrote some on Arrested Development." It's like I'm much more
recognizable for being in the Rescues.
Exactly.
The Rescues was like a big band here in LA. And so people know me. I mean, I am occasionally recognized outside of LA because of being in that band, because we toured a lot for a short span of time.
Yeah.
And it's I've spent much more of my life writing music for media, and it's just not the same kind of thing. You know, it's not the same as singing songs in front of an audience.
True, right? And that's cool. I was going to ask you about the Rescues, just as kind of a side note, because you've been doing that since 2008.
It had to be before that, because it started. That may have been when our big record came out, but we started doing it before I got Modern Family, and Modern Family was my first show with my name on it.
Yeah,
But the Rescues started right around the same time. And so I was touring with the Rescues, and then I got that show, and I was literally writing the show on the road. I was writing the score on the road, and it was not, and my wife was pregnant. I mean, it was like everything was happening at the same time. It
when really it rains, it pours, huh?
Yeah, it was a crazy time. And anyway, so yeah, it's been since roughly around, like, my career as a composer started roughly at the same time as my band got signed. And so it was a wild time. And the band sort of was very active for at least like 2 or 3 years. And now we still exist, but it's not nearly the same thing. We don't really tour, and we're making songs like, track by track,
Yeah.
like building a skyscraper.
How often do you guys get to, get together to begin with?
Well, for the first part of this year, we were pretty actively engaged in making this new record. And then pilot season happened, and I basically dropped off the face of the earth. And there are various other things that other people are doing
Yeah.
that mostly involve family. And so it's been like at least a couple months now that we haven't even seen each other. But then we have a date on the books in the middle of June to, I think, write the last song for this record, and then it all has to get sort of finished, and everybody has to sing their stuff and play their stuff, and it's gonna be a while still, but it's definitely happening.
Because you guys all do vocals,
Yeah,
and you're all doing various instruments. What instruments are you playing on in the
I
rescue?
play the keyboards exclusively. I don't play
Exclusively,
any strummed instruments.
okay.
I have some.
I feel like that's
I
a
mean,
matter of principle. I don't play any strummed instruments.
well, no,
Just
I have them and I like them, and I can play them enough to make noise out of them and write
Yeah.
little things out of them. Uh, and I just got an electric guitar to try to convince myself to try to learn how to play it better. But they play those instruments much better than I do, so I don't bother.
Oh, cool. So you're basically in the studio. Keyboards are most of what you're doing, or are you also doing a whole bunch of other little things?
I'm not doing any. Adrian is producing this record. I am not producing it. I have nothing to do
I
with
don't
it.
know. I meant as a composer, like in your own studio now.
Oh, here.
Yeah.
Well, here I've got. I mean, I do occasionally write on guitar, but it's mainly when I'm dealing with songs.
Yeah.
And if I'm not dealing with songs, everything's going in through the keyboard. And then if I need to record things after, I record things after. But I'm writing on a keyboard. That's like where I'm the most comfortable, and it's what I learned growing up as a kid. And it's I know my way around it for better or for worse. And then I do record stuff afterward, depending on what the gig is.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Did you learn piano growing up, or did you learn keys growing up?
Piano. I mean, I like studied regular like classical piano with my, with the teacher who used to smack my wrist with her ruler. I mean, she was like old school. And then at some point I left because I just couldn't stand it anymore. I studied for 3 years. I started in third grade. I studied for 3 years, and then I quit for 3 years. And then somewhere around seventh grade, I started again because it became clear that if you wanted to get the chicks, you either had to be like a jock or a musician. And so I started again with a different teacher, and this teacher also was training me like classically, but she would let me bring in stuff that I wanted to learn.
Oh, nice.
And so that was normally like Billy Joel, Elton John, and anything else I could get my hands on that I heard on the radio that happened to have a piano in it. And so and then I studied until I finished high school. But I never became like a virtuosic piano player. I'm not like, I can play, and I'm probably about 80% of what I had gotten to in high school.
Yeah.
But I know more about it now than I knew then. Yeah. I understand what I'm doing more than I did then.
Did you ever have to? Yeah, sorry, continue.
But I don't. But I was never a great player.
But at least you do enough to be able to help you in your main job. It's like writing, composing, and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you ever study composition, or was it just like I'm gonna just do this?
At Penn, I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I studied music composition with James Primash and Richard Wernick and George Crumb and like these major modern composers. And but it was the way that they teach at Penn is very academic. It's piano. They teach you piano. And you listen to some orchestral music, but they don't teach orchestration. It has nothing to do with orchestration.
Oh, wow.
Basically, their opinion of orchestration is any jackass can figure out how to orchestrate on their own. And but the way that they teach is about what the notes are and why the notes are what they are and what kind of notes go good together, or why these notes were used in this century, and why, stuff like that.
That's really
So
interesting. I wonder if those composers would hear all the mock-ups today and be like, and hear just the tons of strange orchestration choices, to say the least.
well, yeah. So I mean, but I think the idea was that you could learn it
Yeah.
if that's something that you don't need a like, you can learn it from a book. You can get a great book on orchestration and learn like the basic rules that make an orchestra sound good. And anyway, so that was that. And then I went to USC after that. I went to the film scoring school at USC.
Wonderful. How's the program there?
I personally, to be honest, had mixed feelings about it. It was very beneficial for me in that it brought me here, and I met a bunch of great guys there.
Yeah.
And girl, Deb Lurie was the only girl. Oh, there was one other woman, Sarah Grafe. Out of like 25 people, there were 2 girls. And but I don't know if it was like particularly helpful in terms of learning to score a picture. Like we would do these regular recordings throughout the year with little ensembles and different ensembles every time, and that was fun.
Yeah.
But you were generally, and you would write like music for one scene, and you'd like put all your effort into like writing music for this like 30 seconds of video, and like you get so worked up about the recordings, and it was like really nerve-wracking. And like I think about how that relates to what I do now, and it just doesn't feel like it's the same job. It was like so focused on like all the notes that you would put into these 30 seconds, and now I'm like much more worried about how to not put too many notes in those 30 seconds.
Oh, wow. That's
anyway, but it was fun, and
yeah.
It was a great way to get me here and sort of get my brain into the world of into that world, the idea that you'd be writing music for something else.
But this world does live and die on networking anyway, doesn't it? So like,
yeah, so that's a big part of it, absolutely. But when you think about who you need to be networking with as a composer, like you want to be meeting the people making the movies. So there are some of those people at USC. I like didn't figure that out at the time.
People seldom do.
Yeah, and then I don't need to know other composers.
Yeah,
like I do, and they're great guys. A lot of my friends are composers, but like in terms of getting work, other composers don't get you work.
True. Oh well, I mean, in some way they can, but not in the way that you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, what wound up getting me work was working for other composers as an assistant. That sort of got me started, and then I bailed because I was like, "This is for the birds." I did that for I left being an assistant to go be a solo artist.
Well, and it's a tough decision when you have to make it on your own, isn't it? It's like,
yeah. I was an assistant for 1 year, and I couldn't take it anymore. And it was not necessarily, I think it had a lot to do with my own personality, but it was also like a sort of difficult thing for me it was hard for me personally to be somebody else's assistant. And I also think that this particular person I was working for wasn't like the greatest boss. And so having that combination of, didn't work out so great. And then I bailed, and I was like, and I just wasn't into it. I don't know why. I was young, and I was not into the whole idea of like writing music for TV shows. I thought it was stupid. And so I left, and I started making records and like producing other bands and working in a studio. And I was really into that for the next, like, I did that for like 6 years before I did any more TV stuff.
So now as a solo artist, as a solo composer, you've been working on Rectify, so let's talk about it. Let's dig into it.
Okay.
So I've never had the chance to watch the show yet, but
what?
I know, right? Like I'm so horrible. It's like I should have done my homework and watched all 3 seasons.
You're supposed to watch all 3 seasons.
Yeah, so I got this interview organized within like 2 days.
Okay.
So, so for someone who hasn't watched it,
Yes.
like I know the premise and everything, but anyone in the audience who hasn't watched it, what's
Okay.
Rectify about?
Rectify is about a guy who was on death row for 20 years. He was convicted of murder, and there was this terrible thing that happened with a girl, and it was basically gang rape situation, and she wound up dying, and he was convicted. But it's very unclear what happened
Yeah.
at the beginning of the show, or what happened on that night. That's basically what the whole show's about. What happened on that night?
Wow.
And we still don't know, even after he told us at the end of season 2 or season 3. I don't even remember. Somewhere in there, he told us exactly what happened. We still don't know, because if you watch this show, his character is so he's so not specific and speaks very slowly, and
is he traumatized as well?
Some people refer to him as sort of like an almost Forrest Gump kind of character. I don't really buy that at all, but he's just not really forthcoming, and he's not he doesn't say what he doesn't want to say. And anyway, he's a very interesting character. So that's what the show's about. The show's about that guy, Daniel Holden, and he comes out. So it's in the pilot, he comes out of, he's let go after 18 years in jail, and
because of a DNA test or something that proved his innocence.
Yeah, they've been working to get him out this whole time.
Oh, okay, yeah.
His sister and his family, and he gets out, and the state senator swears to get him back in jail because he's anyway, whatever. It's like a down home Georgia town, backwoods kind of vibe, and half the town probably is in defense of him and doesn't think he did anything, and half the town thinks he's a terrible monster. And the show is about not just what happened on that night, but it's about this sort of emotional state that he's in, and it's like a character study of all of these people and how this one event changed all of their lives. And not just the event, but the fact that Daniel was in jail for 18 years and how that affected him and his sister and his mother and his stepfather and his stepbrother. I mean, there's just it's just insane that it's really interesting to think about how that would affect a family. And that's what the show's really about. And it's slow and luxurious in terms of its pace.
Are we talking about Breaking Bad kind of pace?
I think it's slower than that. I only saw the first season of that show, but Breaking Bad is like an action movie compared to Rectify.
Wow.
There's nothing slower. It's and this is why I think it has a hard time getting a bigger audience. You really have to get into it. When you do get into it, that's why it gets such critical acclaim, because for those people for whom the vibe is right, it's the best. It's the greatest thing ever. It's just the best. If you really like chocolate, this is for you. You know what I mean? But not everybody likes chocolate. So okay, fine. You know what I mean? But if you're into that, if you can get into it, it's very rewarding for the audience. It's just totally luxuriates in its pace and or lack thereof. And that translates to the music very nicely. I mean, it allows all this lovely space for music and for for beauty and darkness and all this just great. There's just time. I'm not writing music over dialogue most of the time. And that's really unusual. I can't even remember the last time I had anything where I wasn't writing under dialogue.
Wow, that must be. Well, I suppose it's a luxury for a composer, or to be able to, okay, I have these moments where I can just really go.
Yeah, you can really go for it. You just can go for it. I mean,
You can put in as many notes as you like.
Put in as many notes as you want, and you can make them really meaningful. You can make those notes have real beauty. You can they're like running to the ocean, and it's like 2 minutes, and you're like, let's do this thing. It's like awesome. That's that's really rare. It's such a wonderful
indulgent was
chance.
The word I was
it's indulgent. It does go for it. It indulges in those moments. It doesn't. Ray is not worried about going for those.
It's kind of interesting
and letting it sit there.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the way you described it, because have you seen Jessica Jones?
I haven't seen that. My wife loves that show.
Because basically, that first season, 10 episodes, a lot of it has to do with kind of a particular event that changed the character's life, and kind of what actually happened that night or that time, kind of thing, and just keeps coming back to it in between the modern day adventures. But it's really interesting the way you described it.
Well, so that happens also in the show. There are flashbacks.
Yeah.
Where you go back to jail, basically, and he's sitting there in jail, and I mean, there's all kinds of flashbacks actually, but
wow.
But sometimes you don't know whether that's an actual flashback or whether he's like dreaming, or whether whether it's real at all, or like there's all kind of bad stuff going on.
So it's like Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
What's a dream sequence?
Yeah, it's cool. It's a very it's lovely in that way.
Yeah. And you get to collaborate with the showrunner Ray Mckinnon. People might know him as he acts on Deadwood, he acts on Sons of Anarchy, but he's like the creator of the show. He's fully involved. He's a writer, he's a director, he's the executive producer. Dude's got he's basically your point man, isn't he?
Yeah, he's everybody's point man. He's really I mean, anybody who's working on the show in any capacity, the actors defer to him. Everybody defers to him. Everything goes through him, which is why I think, I mean, this is something that like first of all, it was for a network that had never made an original show before, for Sundance.
Yeah.
And so they only after this show sort of got going did they staff up and get other people in their network who were like the network people. While we were doing the first season, it was just Ray, and there was like somebody at Sundance that had to like clear stuff, I guess. But,
oh wow.
Now there's more people that are at that network, but Ray is still 100% in charge of the show. It's very unusual and a real luxury, and it is I believe the reason why the show has it has a singular vision. It has a vibe that is not that's not interrupted, and it's not adulterated by any kind of note from any network exec, because they leave him alone to make something awesome. And it's wonderful, there are producers that probably say stuff to him, and I think that he does get pressure to do certain things, but everybody recognizes that it's a great show and they don't want to mess with it.
And that's probably another indulgence as well, is to have that singular vision. Where you're not.
That's exactly what I mean. Like there's just not that many shows like that. Like I don't have any shows. There's always like somebody in charge of the show, but the amount that they're able to really be in charge and say fuck you to everybody else who differs in their opinion is different. Like, some people have more of an ability to say fuck off than others do.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Like, it's not, I'm not saying that they're terrible people because of that. It's the hardest thing.
Absolutely.
And we all struggle with that in every job. How much can you say, I'm not willing to do that because this is my thing? are you willing to lose your job over it, basically?
And it's really interesting because one of the challenges that you always hear about in our world of composing and media and that kind of thing is you really got to find out who the boss actually is, because the boss isn't necessarily the creative person in the room. The boss is the producer with the money.
Rectify, it's very simple who the boss is.
Exactly.
It's very simple. If I want to know the answer to a question, I know exactly who to ask. And he may not be available, but I know where the answer is, where to get it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that actually has become hard on Rectify is getting enough time with Ray beforehand and after the music is written to make sure that I'm on the same page with him and that I know when I watch the episode what is going on and what he's trying to get out of a particular scene and all that stuff. It's like sometimes we don't have time to spot.
Oh, wow.
First season, we had 6 episodes. There's a lot more time to deal with everything. I think this season we're doing 8. And so hopefully that's going to give us a little more time than we had last season when we had 10.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not, that's hard, is to make sure that I have the time with him. And then on other shows, it can be confusing. And to figure out who's in charge and who you're supposed to be talking to and who's the creative director.
Yeah.
Because it can change sometimes from episode to episode. Sometimes the person who you think is in charge may not care about this particular issue on this particular show, and somebody else does care, and that person deferred to the other person for this particular issue. Whatever.
Yeah. No, it is a confusing mess of things in this world. It's like you'd think, for example, the director on a movie had the final say, but no, there's a producer who's putting in the money, and like, well, they need things to be safe, and then like people aren't taking enough risks, or people aren't at it, and then like, oh no, but I don't like the sound of that guitar you used or something, and then it's like the director's like, that's usually what I asked for.
Yes, I mean, it can get hairy. Yeah. It just it's like on any given show or any given movie or any given project of any kind, it can get hairy, and there are times when it just goes by really easily. And one of the great things about doing a lot of television, in my opinion, is that there's a difficult period at the beginning of any show when you're trying to figure out out what the show is supposed to sound like, and we're trying to also negotiate what the showrunner likes, and if you can get the network and the studio to all agree with what the showrunner likes, then so once you're past all that, the wonderful thing about television is that you can kind of like go after that, and then you sort of gradually expand your palette and like the sort of like dynamic range and the frequency range of what you started out as like a kernel of an idea.
Yeah.
And people are okay with that because they've gotten used to it. They've gotten used to it the same way that you've gotten used to it as the composer. You're like, okay, well, here's maybe what I'm going to do for this kind of scene on this show.
Yeah.
And you sort of do that a few times, and gradually you can change that. And I don't know, I think that's a great thing about television, is that you sort of, after a while, everybody kind of gets used to the sound of the show, and then you're making the sound of the show, and then they can't live without it. And then maybe you went a little too far in this one episode, and you like changed the sound of the show because you got bored or something.
Yeah.
And then you have to rein yourself back in because whatever.
But it's always interesting though, because like I watch a lot of the current slate of superhero TV shows, which are like all written by Blake Neely.
They're all Blake Neely. Yes.
So like I've said that like Legends.
Well, because all the shows are produced by Greg Berlanti.
Exactly.
And Blake is his guy.
Yeah, and like Legends of Tomorrow, for example. So it has Blake Neely, a whole bunch of Blake Neely sounds, and then they have this one episode that takes place in the Wild Wild West. So that he just goes crazy doing something else. It's just like,
that's fun. I mean, he probably had the best time doing that.
I'm guessing so. Well, you know what? I'm going to try to talk to him and ask him.
Yeah, you should talk to him.
So you're talking about the musical palette. What kind of musical palette have you developed kind of for Rectify I suppose beyond what people may hear, like someone may hear the soundtrack and be like, "Oh, it sounds like this," but then you've done all these like really fun, neat things and cool tricks in your production. I don't know,
Well,
like,
here's what I can tell you. The show started out, I bought an instrument for Rectify, which is something that I don't always do, but this particular show I wanted to get something that had this sort of what I call dark beauty. Uh, and the show, and that also sort of evoked this sort of slow pace of the show. So I got a bowed glockenspiel. So a bowed glockenspiel is a, I don't know if you've ever seen one, but it's basically, it looks like a marimba, or like a huge glockenspiel, like an
yeah,
oversized Glock, and it has the tines have a little like semicircle cut into them. So then those flip 90 degrees, and then they're vertical, and the tines are like this.
yeah.
Okay, and you take a bow and you bow across it, and it sounds like
Oh,
this, and it goes. So it's almost
nice.
like it's like an organic pad. It's like an actual
Yeah.
instrument that makes these like really, like they have no attack. They're like a slow attack,
Mm.
and like a ramped attack, but it also has these sort of like rough edges that come out. They're like
Yeah.
like almost like buzzing. You can play it with two bows, play two notes at the same time,
Mm.
and there's tons of harmonics going out. They're like an amazing instrument. So that's not all that's going on in Rectify.
Yeah.
That was just sort of like a basic concept that I thought would work. And so I used a lot of that at
That's
the
pretty
beginning.
cool. It's pretty cool.
And it was a way to sort of define the sound immediately. Unfortunately, you can't always do that with every show. There's not like one instrument that just like works every time. But um, anyway, at some point, there's a lot of solo piano. There's a lot of just sort of ambience. So the bowed Glock is mixed with other like sort of synthetic pads,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of sort of clunking around that happens instead of there's no like rhythm tracks in Rectified. Nothing's ever going it just doesn't happen in the show. So there are things that I use to sort of drive things along when things do need to get driven along, but it's not like that classic
Yeah.
sort of film score sound. It's more like they're like they're just like they're just sounds I find in my computer, and they're not some of them I bang on things around in the studio, and they're sort of like woody and metallic clunking sounds that happen sometimes. It's almost like a prepared piano.
Oh, that's
And there have been
fantastic.
some cues where I have done prepared piano when things get really dark and weird and crazy. That has happened a few times. There's a lot of solo piano,
Mm.
just piano, and I will, depending on the scene and the sound that seems like works, I will either record it live on my piano in the other room, or I will use my sample that I normally use that has like a lot of room sound in it.
Do you have a
And
go-to? What's your go-to
I do.
sample?
My go-to is Piano in Blue from Cinesamples. It's
Oh,
just
that's
the
a
greatest.
beautiful one, man.
So I use that, but I tend to use it with a lot of room
Yeah.
and like almost none of the close mic. And I play it really softly. So like you hear mostly the noise of the sample and
Yeah.
not that much of the note. Anyway, there's a lot of solo piano. There's a lot of solo cello, and the cello sometimes is accompanied by um, some stuff. Sometimes there's like arrangements around it. Sometimes I'm like double tracking the cello
Yeah.
and harmonizing with itself, and um, that happens. And it almost depends on the episode. Like and it's not necessarily character driven what instrument is being used
Oh,
and what
interesting.
scene.
Because it
There's a
seems to be a
scene.
very much a character study, so to speak.
Well, it is, and we started off kind of defining each character with a sound and an instrument, but it just turned out that was not going to work for the long run, because first of all, just on a practical level, sometimes Ray will temp the show with some stuff that we've got from previous seasons, and he'll be like, "Oh, I just love this cue here." And I'm like, "Well, that's like Daniel's theme, and you're like sticking it right on this other character." And he's like, "Oh, well, that's kind of cool." And he likes it for whatever reason, because it's connecting Daniel to that character or whatever. So all bets are off, in other words. Like we're just not strict about it. And so that in some ways is very freeing. It's like it's just if it works for him, then it's all good. So,
and that's really interesting because I was wondering, with someone that has such a singular vision, how strict is he with the music?
He's not strict. He's strict with himself. If it works, then it works. Doesn't matter. And so there's no rules. It's a very visceral. He has a very visceral reaction to music. If he likes the cue, he likes the cue. Doesn't matter. You could be a saxophone. And in fact, we've done that. We've got a cue that is about 1.5 minutes long of solo saxophone when Amantha is sitting at the drive-through, and it's awesome. And it's one of my favorite. I put it on demos all the time. It's like one of my favorite things. It's literally a solo saxophone with a bunch of reverb on it, and I've learned a lot from this show about writing music.
Yeah.
And it just sort of like, the saxophone is not inherently a shitty instrument. That's one of the things that I've learned. It can be amazing. It's amazing when you hear the air coming out of it and you feel, if it's written in a way that is evocative, then it's as evocative as any instrument can ever be. Anyway,
I suppose we've had a lot of the the careless whisper, the bold and beautiful kind of sound.
I know, you just
that's what people are thinking
of.
Mind.
Exactly. And when that's just not how we're doing it. It doesn't sound like Careless Whisper. It's not like a solo from like an 80s action movie.
I think Kenny G just that's what people are thinking about.
Like, I guarantee you watch this scene, you will not be thinking about Kenny G.
And that's the thing. It's just like jazz is an innovative art form by definition, and that's where saxophone's doing a lot of crazy, awesome things.
It's just like, it's all in how you use it. It's all
absolutely. And it's funny because you say I've got a glockenspiel, but it's bowed, and it's just like it's instantly very different to anything.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of a glockenspiel. That's exactly right. It's like you take the glockenspiel, you do the opposite of what it's supposed to do, and you have something kind of interesting.
do you get to do a lot of location stuff? Like, 'cause this is all like kind of the southern thing, or so no slide guitars.
You mean like location sounding music? Like I thought you meant did I go to location? I went to Georgia one time in season 2. And it was awesome. We had a great time. But in terms of location sounding music, I can tell you that there probably will be some of that for season 4 because it is in a different location.
Oh, whoa. So you're going to try to tell people that.
I cannot tell you what that location is, but there has been some. At the beginning of the show, we had a little bit of a swampy thing going on, but we sort of but I think that was happening more when we were literally looking at a swamp, and we were sort of in a little bit of a darker place at the beginning. And there are times when the show gets dark, and I do go a little more. Like there was swampy stuff. I mean, I did have some slide guitar in there, but it was all sort of, and occasionally I had like a harmonium, some sort of like classically Southern, like old school Southern stuff going on.
Yeah.
But it all, and some guitar, there is some guitar that happens. There's guitar all over the show actually, but it's usually not
guitar-esque.
It's not guitar-y. There are some guitar-y cues, and but anyway, so in other words, there's not, it has a little bit of Southern stuff going on, in season 1. I think that as we got further along, we sort of left that behind.
Yeah. So season 4, you said we're in a different location, but you're not allowed to tell us
Yes.
yet.
Nope.
And well, what can you tell us? What's in store?
I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything. I haven't seen it.
Well,
I don't have a script. I haven't seen a frame. I will probably get it a week before I need to have a finished score for the first episode. I can tell you that the music probably will be a little different. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I believe that I'm going to have to use a little bit more of a particular instrument.
Oh, and we don't know what that is yet.
Well, I know what that is.
But you're not going to tell us.
But I'm not going to tell you.
So coy. So good. So see, now I'm just going to watch the show just to get to season 4, just to know what that instrument is.
Yes. Well, you're going to be like, oh, that's where they are, so he had to use that.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's a location-specific instrument.
It's a location-specific instrument that I'm going to have to use probably significantly.
Interesting. They've gone to the Middle East, and you're going to use the oud. Well,
That's right.
I'll see. Duduk, that's like fair enough. I was going to say the oud because I play the oud. So.
Yeah. No, that's not. It's in the United States.
Oh, okay.
In the end of the 3rd season, this is not giving away too much if you're a huge Rectify fan because you've seen the 3rd season.
Yeah.
He's banished from his town, essentially.
Wow.
And it's like this weird old rule from like the legal system, and he gets banished, so he goes to a different place.
And it seems that Ray's kind of flexible enough to let you do your own thing and be creative, and he kind of gives you like, here. Is it like he gives you the stuff and he's like, here?
Well, it was sort of that way last season, and it was hard. It was harder than it had been before that. The first season, it's been a really interesting thing because every season's been a little bit different, and it usually depends on his time. The first season, he had more time. So I would finish the score, and it would basically get like, he would get approved. He would come over then after he had sort of had a chance to listen to everything, and he'd have some ideas. He would literally come into the studio, and we would spend about 5 hours tinkering around, messing with stuff. Taking notes out, putting notes in, moving things around.
Oh,
stuff
wow.
Like that.
Obviously, you can't be as involved now.
So then the 2nd season had more episodes, and he was basically not around at all.
Yeah.
And I would write a bunch of music, and he would give me some notes, and then I would send another draft basically based on his notes. And then we'd be done.
But I feel that that's a lot of trust there.
Well, sometimes that would involve then, I would also send stems, and sometimes our music editor, Michael Lieberman, will mess with the stems on the stage as they're mixing the show with Ray. Yeah. And that is not uncommon, but in this case, it was sort of a necessity because there was no real chance for him to sort of get a final approval on anything because there just wasn't time. Now, this season, I don't know what's going to happen, honestly. Also, in the first season, we would spot every episode. Second season, we didn't spot. Third season, I think we spotted like half of them. So, like, not spotting has advantages and disadvantages. And I think probably all things considered, it's probably better to spot.
Did you get a few more notes when you don't spot?
Well, sometimes something wonderful happens and you come up with something that he likes better than what he was thinking. Yeah. But sometimes you go in the completely wrong direction and you think what is supposed to be happening is this, and what he thinks is happening is this.
Oh, there you go.
So it's like, it's fine.
Well, we're looking forward to season 4, and audience, if you haven't seen the show, get on it. It sounds like a pretty interesting and awesome show. So,
it's awesome. It's definitely worth seeing. It's a really interesting show.
What would be your way of dealing with a hairy situation with creative differences, I suppose, working on a show?
Well, I mean, ultimately, like, I don't feel like I'm in a position to tell the creator of a show what the scene should be. It's their job to tell me what the scene should be. It is my job to then write the music that I think makes the most sense for that scene.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a little bit of a negotiation. Like, they're either sold right away. If they're not sold, or they're not. If they're not, then you have to sell them. You have to make it work. That's like your job. Your job is to write music that they want in their show.
Yeah.
So that's basically where I come from on it. My point of view is I am there to serve the show, and you really have to let go of your ego and your preconceived notions about what it should be from your perspective, and you have to sort of give yourself to the perspective of the show and whoever's in charge of the show.
Yeah.
And your instinct may have been one thing, and it may come back to, they may understand later that your instinct might have been better than their instinct, but ultimately it's not your show. It's not my show. It's just not.
I was going to say, to quote John Powell, what's good for the show is good for me.
Well, that's true. That's totally true. And he's, he's such a great composer, right? He's such a great guy, and he writes songs, he writes score. He's like my dream. He's like my dream guy. He's great. He's the greatest. And I've worked with him before, and it's it's very simple. Like, I feel like I approach things in the same way. I worked for them as a singer. I just sang on the Lorax. And
that's awesome.
So he has this great place, and we were just sort of like, he's just having fun making music in that situation. And I think he's right. What's good for the show is good for me. That said, I think that it is important to, when you really feel strongly about something, like when I feel strongly about something, I'll say something about it. But that also does not mean that I won't change it.
Yeah.
I will change it, even if I feel strongly that I was right in the first place. I will still change it. I will totally redo it. Doesn't matter. I can try to convince you that I'm right, but like I was saying, like Ray feels things viscerally. Yeah. Most people feel music viscerally. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't feel right, it just doesn't feel right. It's very difficult for any person who writes music to nail it every time. Yeah. And interpret somebody's words into sound waves. That's a really hard job. So like, if you get it wrong sometimes, it's like, it's fine.
But do you ever get that moment for you've scored a scene, that kind of thing, you're listening back to it, you're like, damn, this really works. This is like exactly what I would want to hear, kind of thing. Like, as in, not apart from like, I'm still trying to figure this out, that kind of thing. But like, something's not on. No, something's there. I think I've nailed something in there. Like, do you ever get that kind of moment?
Yeah, I usually have those moments when at the beginning of working on a show. Yeah. When you're really trying to come up with like thematic material that makes sense for the character. It really and this goes back to like studying music composition at Penn. It's like, what are the notes? What are the notes you're choosing? Are those notes the right notes? Yeah. If you choose the right notes at the very beginning, whether it's like a song or a theme or like whatever it is, if the notes are the right notes, then you are really way more than halfway there, because all the other stuff is orchestration, and any jackass can orchestrate. And it's not, it's not just orchestrated. It's like what instruments you choose to put around that melody, or what instrument you choose to play the melody. Those are choices, and you can skin it 1,000 different ways. But choosing the notes gets you really far. And the difference between A minor and A major. Yeah. and A diminished. These are like massive differences. So, and they have very huge implications on the rest of your whole series of music. So you have to make those decisions very carefully at the beginning, and then it's so easy after that.
That's fantastic, and it's true, because that's one of the things that I notice about composers whose work I admire. When someone nails a melody or nails the notes, I'm like,
oh yeah,
like
exactly.
One of my favorite, composer in terms of melodies, Bear McCreary. Dude is like crazy with his melodies. It's like he's doing Da Vinci's
and
Demons,
he's very like, and he cares about them. You can tell
exactly,
he cares
right?
about them. He works on them. And like when you hear, like when you and with the Ramin Djawadi's theme for Game of Thrones, like
yeah,
the melody is the melody. Like it doesn't. All of the other stuff is defined by that melody. In other words, is what I'm trying to say. So when you choose the right ones, then you're good to go.
Well, I have a feeling that the Game of Thrones theme, he probably knocked that up in like a half hour. It's like,
I'm sure.
I think this might work, and then like everyone loved it, and it's like, oh, okay, I think now I got to do this again.
I'm sure that's true.
It's like, like that's such a like, it hooks you in, doesn't it?
I know, it's awesome.
That's fantastic. I feel like this is a good note to close on, a good piece of advice to close on.
All right,
if you choose the right notes.
Choose the right notes, and then it's so easy after that. What could go wrong?
That's wonderful. Well, Gabriel, thank you very much. Thank you for your time and for just being willing to talk and chat and just chill out with me for this hour.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun, and I hope we get to chat again sometime. Maybe I'll
let's do it again.
Hit you up when I'm in LA next time.
Okay, good. I love it.
Fantastic.
All right, thanks a lot.